Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way Through. I'm your host, Bonnie Worth, and as I say each and every week, incredibly grateful to have the chance to share in conversation and spend this time with you. Today, I'm so thrilled to have a special guest, of course, on the show with me today, Amanda Danielle, who is a life and soul activation coach, and she's here to talk about her remarkable journey. One of the things, of course, that we talk time and time again about here is the impact of our experiences, the wounds, the traumas, the challenges that we have in our lives. And this conversation is no different in the sense really helping to bring some awareness to the power of our conscious choice and how it is that we can navigate no matter the challenges in our life, no matter what they are, whether they're big, resulting or impacting experiences, or even there's just some of the complexities of what can happen for us in terms of even what's happening in the larger, in our larger global scale for all of us. So this is thrill and so wonderful to have Amanda join me here today. I've known Amanda for many, many years. In fact, probably for what has been the extent of my whole career. And I have witnessed this woman go through what have been some of the most life crushing experiences, and always work on herself, work to not just talk the things that she talks about through through her speaking events, or on the many stages that you might see her on, or in other conversations, or even in following her on social media. This is a woman who walks her walk. Everything she teaches, everything that she encourages her clients to do, everything that she speaks wholeheartedly about is because of what she applies to her own life, what she is so committed to, the choices that she makes, the power that she knows and understands within herself to rise above, or to not necessarily rise above or not deal. This is a woman who deals and then is able to rise. She is the epitome to me in terms of what authentic resilience really represents. Amanda, hi, welcome to the show. I am so thrilled to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and what an introduction. Yes, you have been with me through a big majority of my own journey as well.
Yeah.
And I always think, I wonder what it really looks like through Bonnie's eyes, like seeing the deepest of deep and the hurts of hurts, and then the rise, and like you said, the rise back up.
Yeah, it's remarkable to witness it, in answer to that, Amanda. Just, my heart has always been with you, and to just you continue to inspire me through what you've gone through. And so as much as, I've been a part of your journey at different times in your life, in helping and supporting you, you've been very significant as someone who has helped and supported me, through the inspiration that you offer and bring to the world as well. Now, of course, let's dive in, because I've mentioned you have had a multiple amount of challenges. Like, they have been significant, and I would love, we could go through your whole story, from when your journey started, or the impact of things that happened to you even earlier in adolescence, and things like that. But let's fast forward here a little bit, because the fast forward is such a big part of what has been, at least from my witnessing or perspective, some of the most transformational experiences that you have ever gone through. You've met life and death, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about what your journey has been like over the last few years.
Yeah, and looking back over the adolescence years or the earlier years, I thought those were tough challenges, right? I thought
Yeah.
those were going to be big things, and they were big things at that time. But the last couple of years in my journey, coming to the head of a brain surgery, I guess, is what it come to. But the
Mhm.
journey into that wasn't always clear. There were so many things leading up to what brought me to these two brain surgeries that was such a roller coaster of just what we thought was normal things going on in my life, or normal health concerns, or never having answers, and
Mhm.
always digging a little bit deeper. But deep down, like you talked earlier about our conscious minds and our subconscious minds, always knowing that there was something wasn't right.
Mhm.
something wasn't right. And having to go through multiple doctor's appointments, specialist appointments, and preaching my story, so to speak, or
Yeah.
making it clear that there was a pain that was happening that wasn't normal.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And to get, I hear this story so often. And of course, I'm sure you do too, with what you've been through and even listening to what other people have gone through. The, going to all the doctors and having it come back and these reports and MRIs and the CT scans and everything that say, oh, we can't find anything. There's nothing
Yeah.
really wrong. And
Mhm.
yet you're on that brink of going, I don't know. Am I crazy? Am I making this up? Because there's nothing to legitimize what are the experiences or symptoms that you're living through. And this was no different for you. It must have been incredibly uh, confronting and concerning for you over the fact of what you were experiencing versus what the doctors were telling you.
It was extremely frustrating. There was so many things, and I'll say this, that to this day, my first MRI to this day says there's nothing wrong, but I've had 2 brain surgeries. So it was so frustrating. But what was the pivotal point for me is the surgeon that I had, he didn't go off that report. He looked at the imaging himself with his criteria and his 30 years experience and
Yeah.
what had been missed and overlooked. And I hear that so often that it like there's no answer. It's not, clinically showing. It's not this, but I'm feeling this. I'm going through this. And I know even before I had that surgeon, I went to a Chinese medicine doctor, an acupuncturist, and he had said, there's something not flowing right. There's something in your back, and then there's something up to your brain, up to your, in your nervous system. And I was like, well, I'm not ready to tackle the brain. Like, that's a big deal. Like, I'm not really
Right.
ready to look
Yeah.
and face that right now. Let's just kind of deal with my back and my lower back. And I had a private MRI and went through that. And then, and you know what, Bonnie, it literally, and you know this, but it literally was like the knife stabbing pain in my face
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
I couldn't ignore. So naturally I went to the dentist to see what was going on there. And then the dentist sent me to an oral surgeon, and the oral surgeon did take my tooth out. But that's where the pivotal, information came from for me to get onto the journey to the brain surgery, because he said, your teeth are in remarkable shape. He said, don't take any more teeth out. If anybody wants to, don't take any more teeth out. It's not
Right.
that. It's actually trigeminal neuralgia. And I'm like, what's that? Like, don't
Yeah.
even know what that is. And I took that information back to my doctor, who, zoned in on the specialist and the surgeon that was in our area at the time. And that's it. There's so many different factors, there's so many different people, there's so many different things that I had to do and see and hear and jump over and go through. Because it one time, after I had acupuncture, it flared up my whole body like I was having a
Mm.
stroke.
Oh
And
my
when I
God.
went to emergency, they actually assigned me to another surgeon, which he, again, dead end road. He's like, if you think I'm going to diagnose you, and if you don't have this. And I was like, I'm not making this up. Like, this is,
Wow.
what's going on. And so it is a very frustrating journey when you do think you're alone, or you do think you're crazy, or
Mhm.
you do, and what am I, like, what is actually happening?
Yeah, the degree of optimism that I want to say that I witnessed in you was incredible. Your ability to take what was all this negative information that was coming your way and not buy into the diagnosis, being in complete faith and trust that there in being able to not just find the answers or the people to help and with you, but in creating your life, what you were experiencing through all of that surgery and through all of those what were very what seemingly very helpless situation that you were in. And for you to just the way you pivoted your mind, how you talked about what was happening, how you spoke even about what was going on, you never did it from a way of being disempowered. And how do you think that that played out for you in terms of getting the answers or even being able to navigate this, Amanda?
It was so huge. Even going in to talk to the surgeon, the or the second surgeon, the one that I was originally, I looked up on the internet, like his reviews and whatnot, and they were horrible, like horrible reviews. And I'm like, oh, good. How am I going to go into this
Oh,
and not be intimidated and not like, not go into that negative set? But
yeah,
when I did go in and he did look at the imaging after the MRI, and I did get, I was heard, so to speak.
yeah,
I had to take it step by step, and I had to understand different personality types. I had to understand, which I'm so grateful that I've learned in the last 15 years, and I do
right,
implement in my own practice, because everybody has that difference. So when I went in and I said, well, can we look at my neck? Like, is there possibilities that this might be coming from here? Because we all have questions, right? We all have
right,
questions when we go in, whether we have somebody else's experience, or is things related, because our mind, our body, our soul, everything's so related. And he turned and he looked at me and he said, we're not a used auto body shop. And most people would take, like, his bedside manners are bad or this or that. Most people would take real offense. And I just paused and I thought, okay, let's go, let's do what we're going to do. Let's go where we're going to
yeah.
go, and we're going to go step by step. I'm not going to, get into a pity party. I'm not going to go into victim. Like, we just need to do what needs to be done to go forward.
Oh my gosh. Now, the other piece too, I think, which is quintessential to this, is that not only were you, working in terms of the doctors and within the medical community, but you were also seeking other support through alternative modalities. Through, I mean, you mentioned Chinese medicine, but there was more than that. The energy healing, whether it was whether you were administrating for yourself through your own capacity to do so, or you were seeking healers to help and support you. Can you share what that was like, Amanda?
Yeah, it's amazing. The healers that I have around me that support me, the energy healing. So in my journey, I have a wide variety of certifications, and,
Yeah,
Reiki and Theta, so many things that
yeah,
I believe in. So I knew that I could do that on myself, but I knew the power of having a team around me with that. And I actually have different healers that I still see monthly to clear out that subconscious, to clear out those beliefs, to clear out all the non-traditional stuff that we pick up and we absorb and we have, because everything is something along the journey. And
right.
I mean, to this day, I still actually had a session yesterday, because even after going in and having, just walking into places, just being around different energies and people, we take on that energy. We take on,
Yes,
if we're sitting and having a conversation with somebody, and
yes,
they're talking about their partner and it's negative and this and that, like, we kind of go into that slump, and always being
yeah,
able to rise above that. So being able to really just like dust that stuff off of us, like to not
mhm,
let it go with us, and being able to have so many different healers, so many different practices. There's And not just something specific. I've
yeah,
always been aligned and attuned to like what feels good for me, what feels right for me, or
mm,
if an appointment's like, wow, isn't that a coincidence? It actually works in my schedule to be able
yeah,
to get, no
yeah.
different than picking up a book and reading a certain paragraph in it, and it aligns right with what something I'm thinking about or something I'm going through.
It's so amazing, right? Where the help that we require and need finds us when we are open to the alternative aspect of our healing journey. Whether, again, like you said, surrounding yourself with healers and helpers of many different modalities, or even just finding those books that, or going onto social media as an example, and boom, there's something that shows up in the news feed that brings about an answer, or what would even be the next step for us to take in going forward. It's like we can look at, there's a lot, of course, there's always positive and negative about everything. And, people get very caught up in the fact that, your phones are always listening to you, and, they're, you're constantly being, watched, etc. But on the flip side of that, when we can see it as a resource and see it as a helpful powerful, tool, then we can begin to open up and see those things that can come up, for us during these challenges. It's amazing. I always look at it and say, there are a multitude of ways in which, our angels and guides try to catch our attention, the way that our loved ones on the other side look to speak to us. And it can be, yes, it can be because the phone is listening, but there are all of these things are go beyond that. There's an orchestration or a lineup of support that begins to happen, and we find the circumstances, the healers, that we require and need, and the information as well to best support us in making the right choices for ourselves.
And not only that, I believe too, when I started sharing on socials or with friends about my journey and being very authentic, being very
Yeah.
open, being very real about it, and not in a poor me, like I'm going through this, but to get the awareness out there that, it could be a toothache, and then all of a sudden it leads to this, that when
Right.
you're looking for these answers. And the other thing is there's been people that reached out to me that said, I had a friend that had this and you should try this practice,
Yes.
which was so
Yes.
amazing. I drove 6 hours to have a nuka treatment that, was unheard of. I didn't,
Mhm.
when you're in that point and you're almost open to anything, right? Just some
Yeah.
relief of some sort, whatever, it might be, let's try it,
Mhm.
And to the point that right 2 weeks before my first surgery, I was like, do I even need it? Like, are we good? And he was like, no, Amanda, like, we're still gonna go, because
Yeah.
sometimes we do, we have those band-aids or there's the medicines and, whatnot
Of
that do
course.
serve their purposes. But for
Yeah.
me, it's really about, like when you say I talk my talk, I walk my walk, whether it's a physical pain, whether it's an emotional pain, whether it's trauma, it's
Mhm.
really getting down to the root of it. It's
Mhm.
really getting down to the root of it to rip that out and be able to come back bigger, better, stronger, faster.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's amazing because as you said, not only are you open to, so many other alternatives and things that can complement what is the traditional medical approach that of things, but you also, have been so, as you said, open and honest and vulnerable in what have been the times when things are elated and things are going well in your life, to the times admittedly where you're very honest and forthright in terms of, this is really challenging and I'm in a lot of pain, and or this is what's coming up, and you always give what is and these are what I'm doing, this is how I'm so you're constant in what is a flow of inspiration. And without going into, of course, particulars, it reminds me here, even as part of one of our most recent conversations about a speaking event that you did in Phoenix, and how in that audience of people, how there was one individual who had been going through every single thing that you were going through. And from your willingness to share your story and speak to this, that he too began to get answers of something that he's been struggling with for a very long time. That's
Yeah.
incredible. That's such a gift.
Yeah. And the passion, and I believe all of us have a purpose in life.
Mhm.
And it's really whether we're open to being aware of that. And I know when I went into Phoenix, and when I go into any speaking event or any client, any it's, if there's just one thing that can help them, if there's just one thing that they can remember, if there's just one thing
Mhm.
that can change,
Yeah.
inspire, motivate, keep them going. Because,
Yeah.
being in the line of the addictions field as well, like, you never know when somebody's going through something. You never
Right.
know when, so, and don't get me wrong, there's times that I hesitate. There's sometimes that
Hmm.
I don't know if I should share this, or how this may come across. And we have those parts that we go through ourselves and maybe don't share it till later. And on my second brain surgery, I was very, very quiet, because for me, I had to really look within and go, where do I need to be for myself?
Ooh, yeah.
How can I come back fully healed this time? Not saying that, I went out and I was stubborn and I did too
Right.
much, or that's the reason why I went
Yeah.
back in. But sometimes we do need to pull in our own reins and be
Hmm.
still, and
Hmm.
be, in our own healing. And
Hmm.
last year, I took like 90 days, and
Yes.
I was very still. And for most people, they think, what? Amanda by herself, still not,
Yeah.
but did digital, contacts in work with clients and
Mhm.
stuff still. But
Yeah.
as for seeing people, being around people, going places, I was very still. And the depth of the healing that we can have when we're with
Right.
ourselves.
Right. And I resonate, of course, obviously with everything you say, because our work is so parallel, and even it's no different for me. It's like in sharing my story, I'm always, my goal is always the one person. If there's one person who hears my story and it helps to save their life, that's purpose for me. It doesn't have to be the grandiose, numbers or things like that. I'm looking for the people, my or not I'm looking, but my intention is for the people who need that message, to that one person that can make all the difference. And it's incredible how that can happen time and time again. And it brings up another part. I love that you brought this up, because it's a part of our human conditioning, in the sense that we get very uncomfortable being alone in our own company. Most people can't handle silence, because they're only hearing their own thoughts, or those memories are surfacing, or there's feelings coming up that they don't want to deal with. So there's so many things that we as human beings do to distract ourselves from that, being alone with ourself, being alone with how we feel, with what happened, with the thoughts, with our perspective, with just everything we're processing and going through. And I think that's probably one of the things, at least from my point of view, where people actually, it's a great detriment, because they actually postpone or put off their healing as a result, simply because they're that the fear of being in silence with ourself. And yet it's through, as you said, the silence, the presence, where we not only begin to release the things, and through processing it, through the feelings we have, but we come into a scope of greater self-realization for ourselves, as well as we begin to know ourselves at a much, much deeper level.
It does. And a lot of times when we do have unhealed trauma, or when we do have, those toxic thoughts, or we go, and we get so good at going in this busy world, right?
Yeah.
That sometimes it's uncomfortable being alone, or it's uncomfortable, not providing for somebody else. I hear that a lot
Right.
with clients,
Right.
right? They get to that age, kids move out, and who am
Mhm.
I don't even know myself anymore.
Right.
Or they've gone through a great loss, and it's been so focused on that, or we've been so focused on business, or we've been so focused that we lose ourselves in that, or so focused on this brain
Right.
surgery and the health and everything. And there's so many times that there's so much, when there's so much growth, there's so much more room for more love, more of
Mhm.
the good stuff, more of, versus focusing on the negative or the toxic. And we get naturally so, not dependent on it, but so
Yeah.
focused on it, that that's all we see, that's all we hear, that's all we do. Or stuck in our own cycles and our habits, and having
Right.
to break our own self out of that. I even had to break out my own self out of, sometimes you just don't need to speak. Sometimes you
Right.
don't need to share.
Right.
Sometimes you just need to
Yes.
listen, or not react on that, right? And that's one
Yeah.
of the greatest things I could say in the last couple of years for myself too,
Mhm.
is not reacting, not responding, and
Mhm.
really going, okay, why is this still happening to me? Or why
Yeah.
is this, and then when I've healed that in me, I can come back tenfolds with clients, and even just strangers or individuals,
Yeah.
and mention that, right? Or
Mhm.
be able to read something or listen to something and hear it totally different when you're in
Yeah.
a more of a healed state.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, there's a ongoing saying, and I don't know whether you've heard it or not, as terms of coaches and people who do this work, as what you and I do, and we always want to stay one day ahead of our clients. We always want to stay one day ahead of the people who need us, the one day ahead. So this is a constant in the sense that we do have a responsibility, not only to ourselves, but in order for us, especially being in a position of where we are helping other people, that we have a responsibility to take care of this stuff that comes up for us. And I love here too, as you're saying, that the fact of that alone time of what it creates. And for me too, I look at even we can look astrologically. It even demonstrates that the last 8, 9 months of my last year have been a part of healing what are still some of the remnants of my trauma, the remnants of things. And in order for that to happen, I've had to, even as someone who's public like what you are, I've had to pull back in terms of how I was showing up for everyone else, because right now I need to show up for me. I need to create some spaciousness that allows me to be present with what it is that I need. What do I require to nurture and care for myself through this? And also to process, giving space to process some of the contingencies of what those storylines have been. And so I think, we look at, and I see it happen time and time again, of individuals who are out there doing this great work that they're doing, but not bringing into balance the time and space to be with themselves, to concentrate on their own healing, to nurture themselves through some of the challenges. We are here again, based on our conditioning, we are so programmed to push ourselves through, to even if we're tired, we need to keep going, we can't rest, or the expectation that people even have of us, or even our own expectation of what it means to be successful. We need to work hard, we have to keep showing up, and yet that couldn't be further from the truth.
Mm-hmm. And the burnout that happens,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And what good are we when we have no oxygen in our tank or gas in our tank or anything like that? You just running on fumes, and then there's just so much around it, and taking that self-care time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you made mention too, Amanda, of course, a lot of, and I mean, we've often giggled at the fact over how many certificates we hold in different things, because it's like, this this armoire of certificates that sits there. But everything that we've done in terms of our own healing, our own learning, our own support for in this way for ourselves through the complications and complexities of our own journey. But one of the things for you as well is that you really deal with a lot of addiction for people. You made mention to it earlier about people with addicts being in the audience, or concentrating some of your work directly to that as well. Now, addiction is always a result of something deeper, like the trauma, the wounds that are there, those deep emotional scars. But what if you can share a little bit in terms of what are some of those consistent themes that you see amongst addictions that you observe, and as they navigate their recovery?
So a common theme and such a great question, because a lot of people go out and they don't know, or they have an addict and they don't understand, somebody that's
Mhm.
in some sort of addiction, and they don't understand why they are that way. And I
Right.
always tell people, I connect the dots kind of differently. I listen to their stories and ask really weird questions that could possibly be weird, but it's really about what's underlying. Like I said
Yeah.
earlier, getting to that root, and whether it could be, as simple as in grade school, didn't win the coloring contest or something, and that really had that scar
Right.
on that part. Let alone, something huge that was, an abuse or a murder that they had seen, or, something that had happened in the household or in the society or down the block, or, anything like that, and how people are coping with it. We don't
Mhm.
we don't get taught this stuff, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we become what we are tuned to or aware of. And I always like to use the description of, if you grew up with an alcoholic dad or an alcoholic mom, or a substance of some sort, or you don't get what you want from them in a loving, you become the same or polar opposite.
Yeah.
And there's lots of times that men, they may see their mother be treated poorly by their father, or the father figure, or whatever the dynamic is. And they either say, I'll never treat a woman like that. Or just by osmosis, those things happen when they don't even realize that's that habit and that pattern, that learned
Yeah.
behavior. And it could be positive, it could be negative. So
Yeah.
it's in the addiction world. I see that a lot is, okay, let's go back to a time, let's go, even not even when you first grabbed the substance or this, or what it made you feel, or how you were, felt empowered, or what it did for you. but what's behind that? What were
Mhm.
you looking for? Or what did you lose in that time? What
Yeah.
weren't you getting at home? Or what, from a sibling? Or, look at the families that have 5 siblings and the last one's like on autopilot, right? So there is so many
That's me. That was me.
there's so many different dynamics that happen in everybody's life, that it's so
Yeah.
individualized. But at the same time, looking from it from above, it's like, oh, I'm kind of similar, maybe this is a possibility of connecting the dots in different
Mhm.
ways. Or, having clients that they had an absence, or they had a mother pass away when they were really young, so they don't even know what a mother figure is, so they can't
Yeah.
maintain a marriage or a relationship, because
Right.
they never had that. So there's so many obvious, I say, to me, but I also look at it differently.
Yes.
I'm I always say to people, I'm the most non-traditional. I will ask a lot of weird questions, and
Yep.
because it's human. And it's not so much as textbook per se. There are lots that, I will never underrate that. But the thing of just being the human conditioning, I guess we can call it.
Absolutely, absolutely. All those layers and layers and layers of the paradigms and the belief systems and the experiences that we've had to form those based on what, as you said, what those early times in our life were like. And it's not in terms of, this is not about blaming our parents. This is not about, I mean, when you're in victimhood, it's really easy to point your finger and blame these people who have hurt you or the things that happened. But what it is, it's just this awareness to the fact that during those most impressionable and formidable years, that we made some decisions about ourselves. We made decisions that have altered and changed what would have been the trajectory of our life otherwise. And so when you're looking at, as you do this work, with your clients, this is a big part of it, because I love that, it is this non-traditional. It's like, I'm going to take you in a completely different direction. I say it with my clients too. I'm like, this is not, you're not, I'm going to ask you something and it's not going to make any sense to what we were just talking about, but bear with me, because let's go. I want to just explore this with you.
Yeah.
And so it's amazing what gets unearthed and what people discover. And I think that's the key part in it. And I know is about, taking, it's not about telling someone what their problem is. I think we go to we can go into the Western medicine, where we go to the doctor and they tell us what the problem is and they give us a prescription to fix it. Where in this, we're not here to tell the person. This is about self-discovery. This is about unearthing what's deeper inside of them, and then looking at what is the medicine that we can offer, and the medicine that can come through self-compassion, through self-love practices, through being able to even just speak the story, even get the
And
words out of
self-awareness.
them. Right? Yes.
Because, and this as well, with everybody that knows your story, how early in your life you were in survival mode.
Yeah.
And there's so many times we go in, we don't even realize we're in survival, because we're just living like this is just life as it is. And
Right.
then there's also the society aspect, um, that isn't taught, or that is just experienced. Because
Yeah.
I can say I come from a background with a married, my parents have been married for over 50 years, but that doesn't mean that my relationship, just because I seen that, experience that healthiness and togetherness and everything, then you get into society and your partner may not have, and this and that, there's so many different directions that it can go in. So even
Yeah.
though I seen that and experienced that, that hasn't been my experience, because as I've stepped out in society, it's also different. So
Yeah.
there's our trauma experience, there's how society deals with it, and what we see and think is the perfect, or it may not be the perfect, and where we are.
Right. I love that you bring society into the equation here, Amanda, because it's such an important piece of the puzzle, or the piece of the journey. And one of the things is, you're saying that I'm thinking of, and this is something I've had a lot of conversations with some clients about over the last little while, especially when we consider, the eclipses, the energies, the invitations that are happening right now, and what's coming up. There's a lot of a lot of drama. There's a lot of impacting change that is taking place in people's lives, that that's very, very unsettling and very, very difficult emotionally, mentally, to, to navigate. And in one of these many of these conversations, and I have three particular clients I'm thinking of, and if they're tuning in, I'm talking about you, and I love you very much, in the sense that they have had to make, in our society,
Mhm.
and especially on this healing path that we're on, there is a real big awareness to the fact that we require boundaries in our lives of what's acceptable and not acceptable in our relationships, that we need to, speak our truth, that we need to honor ourselves first and foremost, all of these things that are there. And that is so vastly accepted in our society when it comes to our friendships, our partners, our lovers, our spouses, etc. That's always like everybody's like, like this, yeah, like you go girl. This is exactly, you be empowered, you do this. And yet when you consider the deeper stories of some things that people are dealing with that have created the addiction, or have put them into these incapacitated almost feelings of not being able, where there's no hope for life, when we look to these people who need to make the choice for their own health and well-being to step away from their family,
Yes.
from the familial connection, how
Mhm.
quickly our society judges the person who's made the choice to step away and put the boundary in or separate themselves out. And they go, and we begin to go into conversations or this, but it's your family, like you can't do that, you've got to forgive them, you've got to, all of this pressure. It's like it's acceptable over here, but
Mhm.
these intimate relationships, the ones that have shaped you, that have formed your decisions about yourself, and you begin to recognize that are toxic and unhealthy, contributing to the illnesses and the manifestation of all of that disease inside of our body, that it's judged so harshly. Have you noticed that?
Absolutely. And I've said it for years in my own journey and with clients, friends, family, or otherwise.
Yes.
I mean, the boundaries are the boundaries. It's who you have. Again, it goes back to that energy around us. Just
Hmm.
because they, gave birth to you, or because they did something financially for you at one point, we aren't indebted to them for life if they're
Right.
just gonna, have poor treating or whatnot. Not everybody's aligned. And
Right.
sometimes it is to grow apart to grow together, or just to grow apart to stay apart, because
Hmm.
when our values are in line with who we are and our truth and our knowing, it's not about being selfish, it's not about being ignorant, it's really just about being aligned with ourselves and the self-respect. We got to live in our own bodies, we got to live in our own,
Yeah.
in our own four walls every day. And
Yeah.
if we're not happy, if we're not content, if we're living in fear or based on that trauma. I had a client and I talked about it not long ago, and I said, I mean, I couldn't imagine having to see that person that was abusive, you know, day in and day out, a family
Right.
member, or going to that
Hmm.
that funeral, or going to that anniversary, or having to come back together after years. And I know, even though in my own journey, seeing family after that, and I was just like, whew, like,
Hmm.
wow,
Yeah.
do we have to show up? Do we have to have conversation? Do we have to put this face on like everything's okay? Well,
Yeah.
no. What good, what is that creating?
Yeah. Right, right. Oh my gosh. It brings me into just a memory that I have. I recently had my dear friend Deborah Silverman on the show a while back, and one of the things that she said to me many years ago when I revealed my story and we were talking, she was helping me in working through some of the finite things that had come up for me through one of her intensives, and she looked at me and said, because I had this strong familial obligation and in it, and loyalty, this loyalty that was there towards the people maybe who had hurt me, the most in my life. She looked at me straightforward and she said to me, she goes, Bonnie, she goes, you have permission to not be in a relationship with the people who have abused you. Do you know that?
Right.
It doesn't matter who they are. And it's like I knew that on an intellectual level, but I had never allowed myself to really understand it at my core before. And
Yeah.
I think, as you said, that putting ourselves in into these relationships, or continuing to show up, with people who have hurt us or abused us in any way, is very, not only difficult and triggering, but more important, the way that I've come to understand and recognize it, is that it becomes those choices that we make where we begin to abuse ourselves, because we keep continue to put ourselves into those circumstances, into those relationships, time and time again.
And we do continue to abuse ourselves, and it hurts. It's like in a breakup. It
Yeah,
hurts breaking up
right.
with somebody, and it hurts being the one that's getting broke up with, right? It's not
Yeah,
that if you set that boundary, you're free and clear and la-di-da. There's so many emotions, and there's so many levels and so many layers of, whether, is it me? Is it like there's so much back and forth, right?
yeah.
But if we don't allow that boundary, if we don't allow that space, and see clearer without the toxicity, or the abuse or the verbal or whatever the
Mhm.
alcoholism or whatever it is, then we're just spinning our tires in the same circle.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Amanda, seriously, like, I mean, when I'm looking at I'm so engrossed in our conversation and trying to be so cognizant of our time together, because I mean, you and I get into a room, and I mean, this is what happens, right? And it's like poof, time goes by so quickly. But um, I want to just kind of bring in a couple things here before we complete. And one of them is in the sense of, you're someone like that is all about the power of our choices. There is a choice that we can make. And of course, every choice can have a consequence, so to speak, which could be a positive or a negative. But ultimately, we are always being given a choice, and what we choose to do with it matters. And it's one of the things that I am in awe of you about too, because through your choices, you always look to take the higher road. You could react, and you could come straight out and be just the counteracting to someone else's hostility, or their trigger, or their belief, whatever it is. But you always take the higher road. And so I would love for you to share with listeners what strategies that you use in order to do that.
And let's just say taking the high road isn't easy. It is
Yeah.
not, it hurts too. And there's lots of times in my life I haven't taken the high road,
Right.
and that I have reacted or responded or retaliated. And it always kind of come back to bite me, or so to speak. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I strongly, and I remember years ago when we started working together on situations I was going through then, it really had me look within. I had to turn and start looking within and go, is this really about the other person, or is this about my inner hurts? Is this
Mhm.
about actually me? And when I can't change we can't change anybody else. Our words, I mean, the resentment will come back in, or will we actually even feel good about it if we control or make somebody else do such a thing? And really being cognizant of, what can I do? What hurt is this for me? What
Mhm.
is this actually within me and my journey, and what is this bringing up for me? Am I carrying it and, splattering it on the next person or the next coworker, or, the other, like, what is this
Right.
reminding me of? And have I fully gone in and healed this? Because what about this habit and this pattern and this belief that I've instilled, whether I was conscious and aware of it or not? And what can I do about me? What
Yeah.
is within me?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. I mean, I just feel it so deeply. It's like really looking at when the concept of what it means to take self-responsibility for our lives. And it's not about, we're not taking responsibility for these bad things that happen to us, or what other people's, behaviors, etc. We're taking the responsibility in the moment to take a look at, what does this mean for me? What do I need to heal? What's going on inside of me that is causing me to feel this intensity of wanting to react, and addressing that first, and then looking at, I always like to go from there. It's like, how would I like someone to treat me in those moments when
Yeah,
I've maybe haven't showed up as my best person.
it's
And that's
humbling.
and it's grace, it's the offering of grace to people in those moments.
Yeah, because they're going through whatever they're going through. Like I said, back with
Yeah.
the addictions, like people go into, treatment and come back out, and the family members haven't done any treatment themselves. So they're just the same. And this other person is fresh and new
Right.
coming out. And then things just crash and burn. And I'm like, well, yeah, because, they are looking for a different love and support. They're on a different wavelength. Like there's so
Yeah.
many different things, but being able to take that time to self-reflect. And like I said earlier, I mean, I got quiet. I've had to bite my tongue. Yes, I know my truth,
Yeah.
but I knew that was a result of my own hurts.
Hmm.
And it's not that I wanted to hurt others, but I wanted to be heard.
Hmm.
And so
Yes.
being able to do that self-reflection, and then the other thing that I've recently really dialed in on is taking 12 or 24 hours to really chew on it before.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Just saying, "I'm gonna give myself some space so I can just step away, and I'll come back to this. I'll come back
And
when
it
I've
just
had."
might dissipate, right? It just might.
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
years ago working together and I'd be like, Bonnie, send you an email and may not get a reply. But then when we did talk, it's like, oh, that figured itself out. Yeah, that,
Right.
I did get my answer. It is within, or it is comes through it some other way, because
Yes.
everybody has the tools within. It's just a matter of if we actually really dig back into that toolbox and actually use one of those, and all those things, like you said, with all of the certificates you have. Like I do have them within me, and it's not saying
Yeah.
everybody has to have them, but just your life
No.
experiences, just things you hear or know or teach your kids. And are you using them on yourself? And we
Right.
forget that sometimes we have it all
Right.
within.
Amazing, amazing. Well, that kind of leads into a little bit of our close here, because looking at, what message, Amanda, do you have to share with people who are struggling, people who are meeting these challenges, whether health, whether career-wise, like financially, whether this is, look in consideration of what we could say is the quote unquote global crisis that we're witnessing. What message do you have to help people begin to shift the perspective towards hope here?
You know what you know what you know, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's so important to look at it. Is this coming from my own trauma? Is this coming from something I'm envious of in somebody else, and I just want to be resentful? Is there, where is this actually coming from? And I think that's one of the biggest things that, and I ask clients, or I ask myself, because if we don't change, nothing's going to change. If we don't look at it
Yeah.
differently, nothing's going to become differently. And we all, whether it's trauma, whether it's finances, whether it's health related, even with my brain surgeries, some people would say, how have you not gone crazy yet? Like, how have you not like punched a doctor, or, like
Right.
going, what, in the mental institute or anything like that? And it's
Yeah.
because, you know what, it's gonna happen as it's supposed to. Just like my first surgery that got canceled, I had my wristband on. I was being admitted, and they canceled it. Did I know
Yeah.
when it was gonna come forward? Was it unfair? There's so many things that are unfair in life, but at the same time, there's always a reason behind it. There's
Yeah.
always a reason for that distraction, like the distraction or the flat tire that happens, and you get down the road and there's an accident. And just being able to really dial in that you're not alone. There's so many people out there. Lean into those supports, lean into those trusted people, or those services in the non-judgmental, just to be able to have a safe place. And if there's a book or anything, like you said, the quotes or whatever that aligns, those aren't coincidences. Those aren't your phone hearing you. Those you're
Mm.
asking in your head, whether you're admitting you're talking to
Right?
yourself or not. Our thoughts become things.
Yes, yes. Oh my God, so powerful, girl, so powerful. Thank you so much. And for those of you who are listening and would like to learn more about Amanda, about the work she does, if something she said really resonated and you feel compelled in any way to reach out with her, please visit her website, which is askAmandadanielle.ca. You're going to see it on the bottom there. And just really, just please know, I think more than anything, sweet friends, as you listen to Amanda's story, the many stories that come on with all of my guests and the conversations that we have from week to week, that irregardless of what happens in our lives, these challenges and things that we're forced to confront or having to work with in our lives that feel hopeless, that feel like despair, and that create so much fear in our lives, just always remembering that there is always a way through. Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Amanda. It's been such a
you.
pleasure to have you here as my guest today.
Always a pleasure. I'm so blessed that you have me here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye for now.